In this demo, we are going to take a look at how Examine can be used to invoke a SOAP web service that's accessible over a HTTPS endpoint. So the first step is to start Examine if it's not already running. And in this case, I have already started Examine and it's running on port 8080. So you can go to the main page to log into Examine and use the default credentials. And in this demo, I'm going to use the Apache CXF project sample that demonstrates how you can take a hello world example and expose it over HTTPS and also invoke the same web service using a HTTPS enabled client. So the first step is to start the service, and this can be done by going to the WSDL first HTTPS folder. The command to start the service is maven and using the server profile. And this starts the service endpoint on port 9001, and this is the SSL enabled endpoint on which this web service is accessible. So to demonstrate that the Apache sample itself works, we can try invoking the client using the Apache CXF project. By default, this sends a request to the service that we just started and returns the SOAP response and logs it on the console. And here you can see that the greet me operation in this service was called and it responded with a hello and then the input that went to the service. So we are going to try to demonstrate this using Examine as the SOAP client instead of the default SOAP client that this sample provides. To do that, we have to log into Examine and create a new project and choose SOAP client. And in the previous demo, we saw how we can use a HTTP URL based WSDL document. And in this, we're going to take a look at how we can use a local file to browse for the WSDL document that we need. So in this case, this is the sample that we are using, the WSDL first HTTPS sample. This provides a hello world WSDL file that we can choose and import. And once this file is uploaded, you can see that the project name is set by default, but you can change it if you prefer. And also the other thing you can notice is that the HTTPS, the SSL and the authentication tabs are not available when you choose a local file. You can create the scenarios for all the operations that are present in the WSDL and then click OK. And this particular WSDL only has a single operation called greet me. And if you look at the contents of the WSDL, you can see that it has a single operation called greet me that takes a greet me request and returns a greet me response. And this is a document literal type style SOAP service. So if we open the default scenario that's created for this, we can see that the request has a single input, which we can change it to something simple. And this is the HTTPS enabled endpoint. So by default, if there is no SSL configuration done for this request, if we call this should fail. And the reason is because this endpoint requires that the client send the SSL, the request over SSL, and also provide the service, the client keys when the request is made. To do that, we have to first configure a key store and a trust store for this client to use. And for that, you can click on the security tab and use the import functionality to browse for a key store So in this case I already have a key store called client key store, so I'm going to delete this because we're going to import the same key store with a different key store with the same name. So we can go to the location where we have the client key store. This particular key store has a client private key and the server public key already present in this. So we can go ahead and import it. And you will be prompted to specify the key store password, which is set to password in this sample, for this sample. So when you import this key store, you can see the contents of the key store are, there is one private key called my client key, and there is a public key called my service key, which is a trusted certificate that was imported from the key store that the server is using. And once this key store has been imported, we can go back to the project and click on configure HTTP here and click on the SSL tab and enable SSL for this request and specify the key store that we want. If you don't see this here, you can always click on refresh key stores and that will reload the available key stores, and pick the client key store and click on save and then call this endpoint. So again, it looks like the request failed because the endpoint is not active. So we have to make sure that the service is running. And you can see that the response came back with the input that we specified. And it also shows the HTTP status code and the response headers that came back for this response. So this is a quick demo that demonstrates how you can use examine to invoke a HTTPS based SOAP endpoint, and how you can import a key store using the security tab and configure the SSL settings for that request and invoke it successfully. Hope you found it useful. Thank you.